this is Sandy Asch, and I'm talking with Judy Enns, Executive Vice President, the HR Division of Eastridge Workforce Solutions. And Judy, what is keeping leaders up at night these days?
Sandy, there are tons of things that are keeping leaders up these days, but I think some of them that I'm hearing, especially at the end of last year and going into 2017 for sure, is how am I going to get everything done relative to compliance within the HR world? How am I going to find the talent that I need that the leaders in our organizations are demanding? How am I going to keep up with the HR initiatives that I know are essential for retaining the workforce that we need? How am I going to grow, groom, and develop talent when we can't buy it anywhere? It's just not available. So I think the range of issues is more complex, more demanding. The speed with which organizations are expected to perform, the agility with which they're expected to perform is greater, heavier demand than ever. So I think it all simply converges on the external world, the internal world, talent acquisition, building talent, getting talent, keeping talent, along with all of the other human resources demands on a leader. And that's just a heavy load for anybody.
Yeah, I'd say so. So then, in your opinion, and you've been involved in leadership development and supporting HR leaders for decades now, how can leaders stay relevant given the complexity of the demands on them and the accelerated pace of change just in the world that we live in, notwithstanding the political climate, the socioeconomic climate? What do you say to that?
Yeah, that's the backdrop for the demand, isn't it? And I think, to me, what stands out is staying on purpose and knowing fundamentally the purpose of the business, the purpose of the HR function within that business, and the purpose of the business and HR relevant and relative to an organization's clients, customers, business services, but staying honed in on purpose and not being distracted by every new thing that comes down the pike that may be great and wonderful and a good theme to pursue, but may not be on purpose. And I think that the purpose filter is a useful one.
Yeah, you know what? I love that point. And one of the things that I speak about often is how do you Velcro people, all your stakeholders, by the way, internal and external, to your purpose or your why, so that they maintain that focus, that energy, and their passion, and they have the reason and cause to rise up above any circumstances that come their way. And we all know people are just bombarded by circumstances these days.
And it seems to me when an HR leader is in a meeting with other leaders, that staying on purpose mantra might serve well to help filter out anything that would be a distraction, a nice to have, but not a core necessity for driving a business forward. And that's tough. It requires discipline. It requires saying yes to the right things, no to some things that would be helpful, might be important, but are not necessary for purpose. And I think that's a good theme to step into 2017 successfully.
I like it. Laser-like purpose. Can you tell me, what is it that has you be so passionate about building resilient leaders and resilient organizations? Why that as a focus, and why now?
Because it seems to me there has got to be a power coming from some place, and that staying the course, being persistent to stay on purpose, requires some dimension that is so core to how any of us operate that it informs everything we do. And I think that is resilience. The resilient person is the one who can stay focused, stay on purpose, persist, go the long haul, stay the course, and who understands where their inspiration comes from, as I'm looking at the word inspire in your office, and who understands that to be resilient is to win in the long run, and to be able to say no to the short-term wins that may not be as helpful to the long journey ahead. Resilient people bounce back. They pick themselves up. They stick with what they started out to do, and they simply don't give up. And that not giving up, I think, is an essential quality for business people these days.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that grit. And when I think and talk about resilience, I think about resilience on a spectrum. So emotional resilience, mental resilience, physical resilience, value resilience, and relational resilience. And when we master all 5 of those core competencies, what we enable is that agility, that alacrity, the flexibility, and the grit, the persistence, the perseverance, the tenacity to stay the course. And as you spoke to earlier, to stay focused on what's really, really, really important and not get distracted and fragmented by everything that's just swimming around us at work and in life.
Absolutely. And it is so easy. The addictions to the news, the latest news cycle, and addiction to the latest thing in business management or leadership is such an easy distraction. It's so easy to get off course. And resilience, I think, requires that we stay honed into some 3 to 5 core things that are going to propel our agenda and propel our purpose. So if we think of what gives fuel, I think it's resilience gives fuel to purpose.
Yeah, excellent. And just to mention, January 17th in Houston and January 24th in San Diego, we have a series of workshops on just this. How do you cultivate resilience individually and organizationally? And how do you embed resilience in the DNA of the organization so that the organization builds a psychological immunity to whatever disruption or distraction is going on around? So we really are inviting anybody who's a forward-thinking leader, who's committed to the success of their organization in the long term, and understands that in order to stay relevant, we need to be doing something different than what we've done in the past.
Exactly. More of the same is not going to be the inspiration for moving an organization or individuals forward. And the interesting thing to me is it's the HR professionals who need to provide again, we'll use the word inspiration and encouragement for others to master their resilience quotient and to keep others going when sometimes themselves may not even feel so inspired. And yet resilience keeps you going.
Absolutely. This is the time, this is the year for everybody to step into it and really grapple with the concept and sort of break it down into strategic initiatives and learn how to really ingrain and embed resilience in a sustainable way in the individual and the organization so people can continue to grow and thrive. Yes?
And with that in mind, and I do believe it's easy to become part of the air one would breathe and part of the DNA of an organization to the point where people operate from a position of long-term benefit and long-term good for themselves as well as for the organization. But Sandy, I know you've had some thoughts lately that I think are interesting to share with the rest of us. And one that's going to be maybe a little bit heretical. I don't know how you want to. You're good at heretical.
Yes.
I've heard you say that you think employee engagement is somewhat bankrupt. And that's a pretty dramatic statement given all of the research and all the attention paid to employee engagement. So I'm curious about your thoughts behind that.
Yeah, well, it's time to disrupt, and it's definitely time to disrupt HR. And one way to disrupt HR is to make a statement like that, because we've all been so engaged and committed to employee engagement for at least the last 15 years. And here's why I think it's bankrupt. Is the model of employee engagement, which was developed essentially by Gallup 15 years ago, has not really shown any improvement in engagement. So if you look at engagement scores, and we started 15 years ago and where we are now, the needle actually hasn't moved. Gallup still insists and reports that up to 70% of the US population is disengaged. So despite the fact that we've invested just in the US alone, $750 million, and that's according to Deloitte, engagement hasn't improved. So while it's been an interesting model and paradigm, given that nothing has really changed, and I think we've become immune to claims that disengagement is costing the US economy, $450 to $550 billion annually. I mean, we don't even pay attention to that anymore. What I'm saying is that paradigm is no longer relevant, and it's actually time for us to install a new paradigm for the workplace.
That makes sense. And I think your point's well taken, that all the time, all the investment, all the energy behind it, if nothing much has changed for all of that, then it certainly is time to explore an alternative concept, an alternative emphasis that might make sense for these days, right?
Right. Well, and consider this, Judy, as you know, by 2020, which is just a couple of years away now, more than 50% of the US workforce will be millennials. And millennials have different values, and they're driven by different things. And that Gallup, Q12, and the whole model around engagement was really created more for a baby boomer, predominantly baby boomer workforce. And the workforce is changing now. And as the workforce changes, so the way in which we inspire passion and purpose in the workforce has to change as well.
Points well taken. Points well taken. Could you speak even briefly to some tools that you believe and you have found to be true to work with organizations in particular and individuals that help engender resilience? Because there have to be some things that we do. It's not an overnight sensation to say, I'm now a resilient human being or working in a resilient organization. So what might be some of those tools that in your experience seem to be working for organizations?
Well, I believe the foundation for resilience for any individual and organization is self-control. And one of the core competencies of a resilience at work model is to reclaim self-control. And that's really the ability for people to self-manage, to self-regulate, to maintain a calm focus. And you spoke to that earlier. So we want people to be proactive versus reactive. We want people to be empathetic rather than judgmental. We want people to approach their work and, by the way, approach their life with a calm focus, a tranquility, an ability to handle whatever comes their way without being flipped over. By the way, that's not part of an engagement strategy, and that's why I say we really have to rethink that. So when you take self-control and then you then combine that with the ability for us to be a cause rather than effect and to manage our conditions, to be able to be in peak state, but also to be able to manage the distraction and the disruption that we're just bombarded with in the workplace. And you combine that with the ability to remain Velcro to your purpose, that mental grit, that tenacity, that perseverance, and then the ability to really sustain authentic relationships, authentic, meaningful relationships, and have the courage to engage in transparency, authenticity, and vulnerability. That's where I believe resilience becomes viable for a person and inside of an organization.
Yeah. You know what, Sandy, I can't think of a better way to start a new year than to have this conversation with you in particular, but also to think about our friends and colleagues within the business community and in organizations in HR who might benefit and will benefit, particularly as they're laying out their agendas and their initiatives for this year, with additional conversation around resilience. And I certainly hope that between the two of us and amongst others that are in our communities, that we might see some absolute movement forward around resilience. And it might be helpful to let folks know when these are happening again.
Yes, so January 17th in Houston and January 24th in San Diego, and we'll include links below this video for people to click on and register. And we really want to create this dynamic conversation amongst forward-thinking leaders to generate bold new ideas and strategies and really rethink the way in which we're managing human capital and driving the workforce in a way that works for everybody and serves the greater good. So I'm super excited. It's a perfect time for us to do this, and thank you so much for your support.
Thank you, Sandy. I'm excited just to go back to my desk and get things going for this day too. Thanks so much. Look forward again to chatting with you and seeing you in San Diego.
Thank you.